guys, this is Coach Amber from Rec Volleyball and Fistball Club. Today we're going to be going over the picking zones and determining what is considered in system versus out of system. So, something that we are trying to do is systematize Fistball in the United States. And the reason for that is because then it makes it that everyone is on the same page. And the reason for that is if we know what the intent of a pick is or a pass is, then the setters and the strikers are going to have an easier time converting the ball into a kill or at least getting the other team out of system. So the first step is always understanding what is considered a good pass versus what is considered a not as good pick, mainly because of some of the issues that may come from the location of that pick. So in this, we have four different zones. Two of them are considered in system. So in system basically means it is a clean, easy to set, easy to strike location versus out of system is where the setter might be calling help, or the setter may be off balance or exerting more energy to get a clean set. So we are typically going to try to aim to be in zone A and B and avoid being in zone C and D, and I'll explain why throughout this video. So the first zone is zone A. So zone A is near the line and it is from 1 meter back to 5 meters back. So this would be where you pick the ball and the ball is bouncing somewhere in that area. So when we say 1 meter, that means that that is the location where the setter is actually contacting the ball after it bounces. So if it's 1 meter, that means that it's probably bouncing about 3 meters back, and with that forward momentum, it's going closer to the net. So the setter should be setting this somewhere from 1 meter back into about 5 meters back. And the reason why this is a good zone is because it is an area where the setter can do a direct set. And direct sets are very good because they're closer to the line, so the striker has the ability to strike it and they don't have to exert as much energy to be able to hit further and deeper onto the other side of the field. But also, when you have a direct set, it takes the element of a bounce out of the equation. And as most newer fistball players learn, the bounce can sometimes be inconsistent, especially if you have different conditions like rain or an unkempt field. So if there's holes, or if it's a really dry field versus a wet field, or if it's very full grass versus very sporadic grass, the ball will bounce differently. So when you have a direct set, the striker doesn't have to worry about that variable of, oh my gosh, is this ball going to bounce in a weird area? So it's easier for them to line up with that ball. The next location is zone B. Zone B is from 5 meters back to about 11 meters, so about almost half field. So the reason why this is still considered in system is because the setter still has a forward momentum even if they're in X formation. So what that means is if the ball is bouncing and they're contacting the ball in this zone, they still have that ability to line themselves up. Since they're running forward, they can see their strikers transitioning, they can see where the line is, and it isn't a lot of work for them even if they are bounce setting, which they're going to have to do. So they don't have to worry about realigning themselves as much. They also don't have to worry about the change of scenery, meaning sometimes if you have to run backwards and then turn, you have elements like wind and the sun changing your perspective, and it makes it a lot harder for the setters to actually be able to set. So if the ball is picked and pushed in front of them, then they don't have to worry as many about as many variables when they actually have to set the ball. Finally, we're going to go into the out of system zone. So there's two of them. There's C and D. So the first zone is zone C. So this is when the ball is 11 meters to 18 meters back. And the reason why this is not as good as the in-system balls is because if you're in an X formation, the setter has to run back, which means that the setter has to turn, run backwards, and then also find the ball, look at the spin of the ball, and then turn their body and then create certain angles. So a good setter should still be able to set this ball, but it does add a lot of work onto the setters, which is unnecessary. So we want to try to minimize how much work the setter has to do when they're actually trying to set. The also, like, another thing to remember is that the angle change can make the strikers work harder. So in this example, there is a triangle here. So this would be where the setter would be trying to set. So in theory, the setter is going to set a nice straight ball down the middle of the field. But as we know, we're all human and there is that element of human error, which means that there is a chance that the ball may go to the left or the right if the angle of the platform isn't perfect. So the issue with that is, even if it's a small change of angle, if it's a 20% angle or more or less, it as you get further away from the line or the net, it makes it that the ball is going to shift further and further. So it could be 3 meters to the right or 5 meters to the left or something like that. Versus if you were to be closer to the net and doing a direct set, notice how the green triangle is the same angle. But when you are closer to the net and you have that element of error, look at how much smaller that window is of error. So think about it. If you were a striker and you had a ball coming from the C zone and the setter makes a 10% angle change, and that is 3 or 5 meters to your left or right, if they make that same angle error when you're closer to the net, maybe it's only 1 meter to your left or right, which is a lot easier to adjust to. So if you're further away from the net, it's a lot easier for the setters to make angle errors. And especially if they're trying to bounce it and push that ball, because now they're running backwards, it's going to be a lot easier for them to make those errors. And now the strikers have a lot more energy expenditure on just trying to get under the ball to line up with it. And then finally, we have zone D. So zone D is 18 meters back to 25 plus meters. So typically this is off of a shanked first ball. The setter is almost 100% of the time going to call help, which means that a player is going to probably have to take this ball out of the air because it may go behind the end line. And as you know, if the ball bounces outside of the boundaries of the fistball court or field, it is a dead ball. So setters may have to take the ball out of the air, and in some cases, it is somebody who is not a dedicated setter. Now, again, at the higher levels, everyone should be able to set properly, but it does add that challenge if you're further away from the net and also like outside of the court, that you're going to have to take that ball out of the air and the ball is going to be moving pretty quick. So you are most likely going to make errors. The other thing is, if you are taking it from that deep on the field, there is a very, very high chance that you are going to have to really send that ball. And one of the most common issues when you're taking a ball from that deep is when you set it, there's going to probably be a lot of forward topspin on that ball, which means that when it bounces, it's going to kick forward. So now the strikers have to look at the quality of the set and say, wow, there's a lot of forward momentum, forward spin on this ball. I now have to try to figure out where it's going to shoot forward to be able to actually contact and adjust my hit to this ball. And in some cases, if the ball is pushed too far forward, it's going to be really close to the net or line, and it's going to be just like a little tap on the way up, or the striker may not be able to even hit the ball. So we want to try to minimize how often we are out of system, and we want to make it that our first touch is a good quality pass that is basically making it that the setter has an easier time and the front line or strikers have an easier time as well. So if we make a lot of errors early in the play, meaning that on that first touch, it means that we're at a higher risk of making errors. So we want to minimize how often that happens by pushing that ball forward and making sure that it's really high, and also trying to minimize how much spin is on that ball. So hope that this helps you guys out. Thank you so much for watching, and keep watching our series. Bye.